Hello everyone, I am very glad that you're joining this story. Subscribe, like and comment. Enjoy the story, smile more often.
I came home one day to find out my car wasn't in the driveway. My parents had let my sister borrow it without even asking me. The real shock came later, though. She totaled it, and when I confronted them, they told me to just buy another one. Now they're asking me to split my inheritance with her, and I don't even know where to begin. It all started on a Thursday that should have been as ordinary as any other. Work had been exhausting, and all I wanted was to kick off my shoes, grab a snack, and collapse on the couch. But the second I pulled into the driveway, or rather, where the driveway should have been, it was clear that something was off. My car wasn't there. At first, I thought maybe I'd parked it somewhere else the night before and just forgotten. But after a quick glance at the garage and the curb in front of the house, it was obvious my car was gone. My stomach twisted with a mix of confusion and annoyance as I headed inside to figure out what was going on. "Mom, have you seen my car?" I called out as I walked through the door. She was sitting in her usual spot on the couch, flipping through one of her magazines, and didn't even bother looking up. "Your sister borrowed it," she said casually, as if she were commenting on the weather. "Borrowed it?" I repeated, my voice rising slightly. "Without asking me?" "She needed to run some errands," Mom said, still flipping pages. "You weren't home, and she was in a rush." I turned to my dad, who was sitting at the kitchen table, eating his sandwich. "Did you know about this?" He looked up and shrugged. "She'll bring it back." "What's the big deal?" "What's the big deal?" I echoed, incredulous. "It's my car. You can't just let someone take it without my permission." My mom finally glanced up from her magazine, looking mildly annoyed. "Don't be so dramatic. It's just a car." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. It wasn't like this was the first time my sister, Emma, had pushed boundaries, but taking my car without so much as a text was a whole new level of audacity. I pulled out my phone and tried calling her. No answer. I sent a text, "Where is my car?" A few minutes passed, and then came the reply, "Relax, I'm just running some errands. I'll bring it back soon." "Soon?" I muttered under my breath, staring at the screen. I went back into the living room, determined to make my frustration clear. "You guys don't see a problem with this?" I asked my parents. "She's your sister," my dad said, as if that explained everything. "She probably just needed to pick up groceries or something." "Groceries?" I shot back. "Then why didn't she take her own car?" My mom sighed dramatically, closing her magazine. "Her car's in the shop, and she didn't have time to wait around. She said she'd be quick." "Stop making such a fuss." I wanted to argue more, to make them understand how ridiculous this was, but I knew it would be pointless. My parents had always had a blind spot when it came to Emma. She was the baby of the family, the one who could do no wrong, while I was the one expected to be the responsible one. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling of unease. Emma wasn't exactly known for her stellar driving or her attention to detail, and the thought of her behind the wheel of my car without my consent made my blood boil. I spent the rest of the evening trying to distract myself, but every time my phone buzzed, my heart jumped, hoping it was Emma letting me know she was back. But the hours dragged on, and there was no sign of her or my car. By the time I went to bed that night, frustration had turned into outright anger. I couldn't help but wonder, what kind of mess was Emma getting me into this time? When I woke up the next morning and my car still wasn't in the driveway, my frustration hit a boiling point. I'd spent most of the previous evening trying to calm myself down, convincing myself that Emma would return the car before the night was over. But now it was clear she had no intention of bringing it back anytime soon. I grabbed my phone and dialed her number, my heart pounding with irritation. She answered on the second ring, and I could tell from her tone that she was already on the defensive. "Hey, what's up?" she said, her voice casual, like we were chatting about the weather. "What's up?" I said, barely able to keep my voice steady. "Where's my car, Emma?" She sighed dramatically. "Relax. I had to use it for a little longer than I thought. I'll bring it back tomorrow." "Tomorrow?" My voice rose, and I could feel my patience slipping. "Emma, you can't just take my car without asking and keep it overnight. Do you have any idea how irresponsible that is?" Her response made my blood boil. "Oh my God, chill out," she said, her tone dripping with condescension. "It's not like I stole it. I just borrowed it for a bit longer than I planned. What's your problem?" "My problem," I snapped, "is that you didn't ask for my permission, and now you're acting like it's no big deal. What if I needed it? What if something happened?" "Nothing's going to happen," she said with a dismissive laugh. "I'm a good driver, okay? Stop worrying so much." I wanted to scream. Emma's complete lack of accountability was infuriating, but it wasn't surprising. She had a long history of brushing off responsibility, and our parents had always let her get away with it. Now it felt like she was extending that same attitude to me, and I wasn't having it. "I'm not joking, Emma," I said firmly. "I want my car back. Today." "Fine, fine," she said, her voice laced with annoyance. "I'll try to drop it off later, but don't freak out if I'm a little late. I have a few more errands to run." I hung up without saying goodbye. Her cavalier attitude left me seething, and I spent the rest of the day stewing in frustration, checking my phone every 5 minutes for an update that never came. By evening, there was still no sign of Emma or the car. I tried calling her again, but this time, she didn't pick up. My texts went unanswered too, and I could feel my worry starting to mix with anger. What if she'd gotten into an accident? What if something had happened to the car? I marched into the living room where my mom and dad were watching TV and explained the situation. "Emma still hasn't brought my car back," I said, my voice tight with frustration. My dad glanced at me over the top of his glasses. "She said she'll bring it back, didn't she? Just give her some time." "Give her some time? It's been over 24 hours. She didn't even ask to borrow it in the first place. How is this okay?" My mom sighed, clearly irritated by the interruption. "You're overreacting. Emma's a responsible adult. She'll bring it back when she's done. Why are you making such a big deal out of this?" "Because it is a big deal," I shot back. "It's my car, not hers. If something happens to it, I'm the one who's on the hook, not her." My parents exchanged a look, one that I knew all too well. It was the same look they gave me every time I tried to hold Emma accountable for something. The one that said, "Why can't you just let it go?" "Look," my dad said after a moment, "we'll talk to her when she gets home, okay? In the meantime, stop stressing yourself out. It's just a car." "It's not just a car," I muttered, but I could tell I wasn't going to get anywhere with them. I went back to my room and tried to distract myself, but it was no use. My mind kept racing with worst-case scenarios, each one more infuriating than the last. Emma's flippant attitude, my parents' dismissiveness, the sheer audacity of the whole situation. It was too much to handle. As the hours ticked by with no word from Emma, one thing became clear. This wasn't going to end well. And deep down, I knew it was only a matter of time before everything came crashing down. The call came early the next morning, jarring me awake from a restless sleep. My phone buzzed on the nightstand, and I grabbed it groggily, half expecting another flippant excuse from Emma. Instead, I saw an unfamiliar number on the screen. "Hello," I mumbled, still trying to shake off the fog of sleep. "Is this the owner of a black sedan with license plate?" The voice on the other end began, rattling off my car's information. "Yes," I said, sitting up abruptly. My heart started to pound. "Why? What's going on?" "This is Officer Grant with the City Police Department. Your vehicle was involved in an accident early this morning. It struck a guardrail on Westlake Avenue." I felt the blood drain from my face. "Is everyone okay?" I asked, my voice shaky. "Thankfully, there were no serious injuries," the officer replied. "The driver, Emma, was shaken up but unhurt. However, I have to inform you that the vehicle is totaled." By the time the call ended, my hands were trembling. I sat there for a moment, staring at the phone, trying to process what I'd just heard. My car, the car I'd worked so hard to buy and maintain, was gone, and Emma had been the one behind the wheel. I stormed into the kitchen, where my parents were sitting with their morning coffee. "Emma crashed my car," I said, my voice trembling with a mix of anger and disbelief. My mom set down her mug and looked at me with a mix of concern and mild annoyance. "Is she okay?" "Yes," I said through gritted teeth. "She's fine, but the car is totaled." "Well," my dad said, shrugging, "that's a relief. Cars can be replaced. People can't." I stared at him, stunned. "That's it? That's all you have to say? She took my car without asking, wrecked it, and now I'm supposed to just move on?" My mom sighed, clearly unimpressed by my reaction. "You're being dramatic," she said. "It's just a car. At least Emma's okay." "Just a car?" I repeated, incredulous. "Do you have any idea how much I've invested in that car? The down payment, the monthly payments, the insurance, all of it was on me. And now it's gone because Emma decided she could take it without even asking. She didn't mean to crash it," my dad said, as if that somehow absolved her of responsibility. "It was an accident. That doesn't make it okay." I snapped. "She took it without permission. That's theft, whether you want to admit it or not. And now I'm left with nothing." My mom rolled her eyes. "Stop being so harsh on your sister. She's probably already feeling bad enough about this." "Good," I said, my voice shaking. "She should feel bad. But feeling bad isn't going to fix this, is it?" The more I tried to get through to them, the more they dug their heels in. To them, Emma's well-being was the only thing that mattered. My car, my finances, and my feelings were an afterthought at best. I finally gave up and went back to my room, slamming the door behind me. I called Emma, ready to let her have it, but she didn't pick up. Instead, she sent me a text. Sorry about the car. It wasn't my fault. The roads were icy, and someone cut me off. Her nonchalant tone sent me over the edge. Not your fault? I typed furiously. You took my car without asking. That's entirely your fault. We need to talk about how you're going to make this right. Her reply came a few minutes later. I'll figure it out. Just give me some time. I wanted to scream. Figure it out? That wasn't good enough. Not after the mess she'd made of my life. The rest of the day passed in a haze of anger and frustration. I kept replaying the conversation with my parents in my head, growing more and more resentful of their casual dismissal of what had happened. By evening, I'd made up my mind. If Emma thought she could brush this off like it was no big deal, she was in for a rude awakening. I wasn't going to let her, or my parents, get away with treating me like this anymore. Little did I know, this was only the beginning of a much bigger battle, one that would test every ounce of patience and resolve I had. After the shock of the crash had worn off, I knew I had to confront Emma. I needed to hear her side of the story, to see if she'd take even a shred of responsibility for what she'd done. But deep down, I already knew what to expect. Emma had a knack for deflecting blame, and this situation was no different. When I finally got her on the phone, her voice was dripping with exasperation, like I was inconveniencing her by wanting answers. It wasn't my fault, she said the second I brought up the crash. The roads were icy, and some idiot cut me off. What was I supposed to do? Just let myself crash into them? What you were supposed to do, I said, barely keeping my anger in check, was not take my car in the first place. She sighed loudly, as if my words were unreasonable. Oh, come on. I told you I needed it for errands. How was I supposed to know this would happen? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Emma, I said, my voice rising, you didn't ask me. You didn't even tell me. You just took it. Do you have any idea how irresponsible that is? You're making this a bigger deal than it needs to be, she shot back. It's just a car. You can get another one. Besides, don't you have insurance? Isn't that what it's for? Her casual tone was infuriating. Insurance isn't going to replace the car completely, I snapped. Do you even realize the financial hit I'm taking because of this? The deductible alone is hundreds of dollars, not to mention the fact that I have to figure out transportation now. Well, I don't know what you want me to do about it, she said, her tone turning defensive. I'm not made of money. It's not like I can just buy you a new car. Her complete lack of accountability left me speechless. I hung up the phone, shaking with frustration, knowing that I wasn't going to get any resolution from her. When I tried venting to my parents, I was met with the same dismissive attitude. She didn't mean to crash it, my dad said when I told him about my conversation with Emma. It's not like she did it on purpose. That's not the point, I replied, struggling to keep my voice calm. She took my car without asking. She made a choice, and now she needs to deal with the consequences. My mom chimed in then, her tone filled with annoyance. You're being unreasonable. Emma's already upset about the accident. Do you really need to make her feel worse? She's upset, I said, incredulous. What about me? I'm the one who lost my car. I'm the one stuck dealing with the aftermath of her decision. Why is it always about her feelings? My dad sighed, setting down his coffee. Look, it's done. The car's gone. What do you want us to do about it? Just buy another one and move on. Their words felt like a slap in the face. Just buy another one? I repeated, my voice shaking. Do you think it's that simple? Cars aren't cheap. I saved for years to afford that one. And now it's gone because Emma couldn't bother to ask for permission. You're making too much of this, my mom said, waving a hand dismissively. It's not worth all this drama. You can afford a new car, can't you? Just let it go. I stared at them, dumbfounded. They weren't just defending Emma. They were completely ignoring the fact that I'd been wronged. It was like my feelings didn't matter at all, as long as Emma was shielded from any consequences. The lack of accountability from all sides left me feeling isolated and angry. I started to realize this wasn't just about the car. It was about a pattern that had existed for years. Emma had always been the golden child, the one who could do no wrong, while I was expected to be the responsible one. But this time, I wasn't going to let it slide. I refused to let them brush this off like it was nothing. Emma had made a mistake, a costly one, and it wasn't fair for me to shoulder the burden alone. As I sat in my room that night, scrolling through ads for used cars and calculating the financial hit I was about to take, I made a promise to myself. I wasn't going to let them sweep this under the rug. Emma, and my parents needed to understand that actions have consequences, and I was prepared to fight for what was right no matter how hard it got. Little did I know, the fight was only just beginning. As if losing my car wasn't enough, dealing with the insurance company turned out to be an absolute nightmare. I called them the day after the crash, hoping they'd at least make the process straightforward. Instead, I was met with one obstacle after another. Since your sister wasn't listed as a covered driver on your policy, the agent explained, we're unable to cover the full cost of a claim. I felt the familiar pang of frustration rise in my chest. But she's my sister, I argued. I didn't give her permission to drive the car in the first place. I understand your frustration, the agent said in a practiced, calm tone. But unfortunately, the policy terms are clear. Unauthorized drivers aren't fully covered. We can cover part of the cost based on the vehicle's assessed value before the accident, but you'll still be responsible for the remaining amount. How much are we talking about? I asked, bracing myself. When they told me the amount, my stomach dropped. The payout would barely scratch the surface of what I'd need to replace my car. And on top of that, I have to pay the deductible out of pocket. The total financial hit was devastating. After hanging up with the insurance company, I went to my parents to explain the situation. Maybe, I thought, this would be the wake-up call they needed to see just how badly Emma's actions had affected me. I just got off the phone with the insurance company. I began, trying to keep my tone calm. They're not covering the full cost of the car because Emma wasn't on the policy. I'm going to be out thousands of dollars because of this. My mom didn't even look up from her tablet. Well, that's what insurance is for, she said dismissively. Did you not hear me? I said, my frustration bubbling over. They're not covering everything. I'm stuck paying the deductible and the difference, and it's going to cost me a fortune to replace the car. My dad finally looked up, frowning. You got a good job, he said. You'll figure it out. It's not the end of the world. That's not the point, I said, struggling to keep my voice steady. Emma took my car without permission. She wrecked it, and now I'm left with a financial mess. Don't you think she should take some responsibility for this? My mom sighed, setting down her tablet with an exaggerated huff. You're still harping on this? She didn't mean to crash the car. It was an accident. Why are you making this such a big deal? Because it is a big deal. I shot back. I've lost my car. I'm out thousands of dollars. And Emma hasn't even apologized, let alone offered to help pay for the damage. She doesn't have the money, my dad said matter-of-factly. You know that. And besides, what's done is done. You need to move on. Their dismissiveness was like a slap in the face. So that's it? I said, incredulous. You're just going to let her walk away from this without any consequences? She took my car without asking, destroyed it, and now I'm the one who has to deal with it. How is that fair? Life's not always fair, my mom said, standing up to leave the room. Stop holding this over your sister's head. She's already been through enough. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Not only were they refusing to hold Emma accountable, but they were also making me out to be the bad guy for even expecting some kind of restitution. I called Emma later that evening, hoping she'd at least be willing to talk about helping with the costs. Look, I said, trying to keep my frustration in check. The insurance isn't covering everything. I'm going to be out a lot of money because of this. You need to contribute something. She let out a humorless laugh. You know I can't afford that, she said. I don't even have a steady income right now. How do you expect me to pay you back? I expect you to take responsibility for what you've done, I said. You can't just wreck my car and act like it's not your problem. Her tone turned defensive. I didn't mean to crash it, okay? It's not like I wanted this to happen. And besides, it's not my fault the roads were icy. Maybe you should have gotten better insurance if you're so worried about money. That last comment was the final straw. You got to be kidding me, I said, my voice shaking with anger. You took my car without asking. You wrecked it, and now you're blaming me for not having better insurance? Do you even hear yourself? I'm not having this conversation, she said, her tone icy. I've got enough on my plate without you guilt-tripping me about something I can't change. She hung up, leaving me sitting there with the phone still pressed to my ear, shaking with frustration. That night, as I sat down to crunch the numbers and figure out how I was going to afford a replacement car, one thing became clear. I was on my own. My parents weren't going to help. Emma wasn't going to help. And somehow, I was the one being painted as the villain for wanting some accountability. It wasn't just the financial burden that weighed on me. It was the betrayal. The people who were supposed to acting like my struggles didn't matter, as long as Emma was spared any discomfort. But I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't going to let them walk all over me. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. As the days dragged on, the weight of my frustration grew heavier. It wasn't just about the car anymore. This whole ordeal had ripped the lid off a truth I'd been trying to ignore for years. My parents' blatant favoritism toward Emma. It was nothing new. She'd always been the golden child, the one who could do no wrong, while I was expected to shoulder the burden of being the responsible one. Growing up, it was little things at first. If Emma forgot to do her chores, I'd be asked to pick up the slack. If she got a bad grade, my parents would excuse it, saying she's trying her best. Meanwhile, I'd get lectures about working harder if I brought home anything less than an A. Back then, I chalked it up to being the older sibling. But this was a whole new level of unfairness. I don't get it, I said one evening during yet another argument with my parents. Why are you bending over backward to defend her? She's not a kid anymore. She's an adult, and she should face the consequences of her actions. My mom sighed, her exasperation written all over her face. You don't understand, she said, as if I were the unreasonable one. Emma's going through a tough time right now. The last thing she needs is her brother piling on. A tough time? I said, incredulous. You mean the tough time she brought on herself by wrecking my car? How is that my fault? Why am I the one being punished for her mistakes? She didn't mean to wreck the car, my dad chimed in, as if that excuse somehow absolved her of everything. That's not the point. I shot back. The point is that she took it without asking, and now I'm stuck dealing with the fallout. You're acting like I'm the bad guy for expecting her to take some responsibility. Maybe you should cut her some slack, my mom said, her tone sharp. You don't know what it's like to be in her shoes. Oh, please, I said, unable to hide the bitterness in my voice. What's so hard about her life? She doesn't have a job because she refuses to stick with one. She doesn't pay rent because she's still living here. And now, she's destroyed my car, and I'm supposed to feel sorry for her? The room fell silent for a moment, the tension so thick it was almost suffocating. I could feel my parents' disapproval radiating toward me, but I refused to back down. You've always done this, I finally said, my voice quieter but no less firm. You let her get away with everything, and I'm the one who has to clean up the mess. It's been that way my whole life. That's not true, my dad said defensively. We've always treated you both equally. Equally? I laughed bitterly. Do you even hear yourselves? You're defending her actions right now. You're telling me to just suck it up and move on because you don't want to deal with the fact that she messed up. How is that equal? My mom opened her mouth to respond but closed it again, as if she couldn't come up with a counterargument. That night, I replayed the conversation in my head over and over again, each detail fueling my frustration. No matter how much I tried to explain my side, it felt like my parents simply didn't care. To them, Emma's feelings mattered more than anything else. More than my car, more than my financial burden, and certainly more than my sense of fairness. I thought back to all the other times Emma had been let off the hook. There was the time she borrowed my laptop for school and accidentally spilled soda on it, ruining it completely. My parents had brushed it off, saying it was an accident. She didn't mean to. I'd had to save for months to replace it, while Emma didn't even get so much as a lecture. Or the time she borrowed money from my wallet without asking. When I confronted her, she said she'd been in a pinch and promised to pay me back. She never did, and my parents' response? She probably needed it more than you did. This was just another chapter in the same story, but this time, the stakes were higher. This wasn't just a ruined laptop or a few missing dollars. This was a car I'd worked hard to buy, a car that represented my independence and responsibility. And now it was gone, along with any hope of accountability from my sister or support from my parents. I thought about confronting Emma again, but I knew it would be pointless. She'd just deflect, as always, and I'd end up even angrier than before. My parents' favoritism had taught her that she didn't have to take responsibility for anything, and she wasn't about to start now. Still, I couldn't shake the anger that burned inside me. I was tired of being the responsible one, the one who always had to pick up the pieces. And for the first time, I realized that if I wanted justice, I'd have to fight for it on my own. This wasn't just about the car anymore. It was about standing up for myself and refusing to let my family's favoritism keep me in the shadows. Little did I know, the battle was about to get even messier. It had taken me weeks to save enough for a down payment on a new car after the insurance fiasco left me with a fraction of what I needed. I'd spent countless hours researching, comparing prices, and test driving options, determined to find a vehicle that would fit both my needs and my strained budget. Finally, I drove home in a modest sedan, not flashy, but reliable, and I felt a small sense of accomplishment despite the financial hit I'd taken. For a brief moment, I thought things might settle down. Emma had avoided me since the last blow-up, and I figured she'd realize that she was on thin ice. But As I should have known by now, Emma wasn't one to stay quiet for long. The breaking point came less than a week after I brought the new car home. I was sitting in the living room, scrolling through my phone when Emma waltzed in and dropped the bombshell. "Hey," she said casually, as if she were asking for a ride to the store. "Can I borrow your new car tomorrow? I've got a job interview, and I need to make a good impression." For a moment, I thought I'd misheard her. I stared at her, my brain struggling to process what she'd just said. "You're kidding, right?" I finally managed my voice flat. She tilted her head, looking genuinely confused by my reaction. "Why would I be kidding?" "Because the last time you borrowed my car," I said, my tone sharper now, "you totaled it. Or have you conveniently forgotten that part?" Emma rolled her eyes. "That wasn't my fault, and you know it. The roads were icy, and someone cut me off. Besides, you have insurance now, don't you? It's not like it's a big deal." I felt my blood boil. "Not a big deal? Are you serious? You wrecked my car, left me with thousands of dollars in bills, and you didn't even apologize. Now you want to borrow my new car? Are you out of your mind?" She shrugged, completely unfazed by my outburst. "Look, I need to get to this interview, okay? It's important. If I don't get this job, I'll be stuck here even longer, and I'm pretty sure you don't want that." Her audacity was staggering. "If this job is so important to you," I said, barely keeping my voice steady, "why don't you take the bus? Or call a rideshare? Or better yet, use your own car when it's out of the shop? Because those options aren't practical," she said, crossing her arms like I was the one being unreasonable. "Come on, don't be such a jerk. I'll be careful this time." "Careful?" I repeated, incredulous. "Emma, you've never been careful in your life. You're not borrowing my car. End of discussion." But, of course, it wasn't the end of the discussion. Not for Emma. She stormed out of the room, slamming the door behind her, and I could hear her muttering under her breath about how unfair I was being. Minutes later, my mom appeared, her expression a mix of irritation and concern. "Why are you being so difficult?" she asked, as if I were the unreasonable one. "Difficult?" I said, struggling to keep my composure. "She wrecked my last car, Mom. I'm still paying for it. And now she wants to borrow my new one? How is that even a question?" "She didn't wreck it on purpose," my mom said, her tone exasperated. "She's trying to get her life together, and you're making it harder for her." "I'm making it harder?" I said, my voice rising. "I've already been through enough because of her. She's the one who needs to take responsibility for her actions. I'm not going to risk losing another car just because she can't figure out how to handle her own problems." The argument spiraled from there, with my mom defending Emma at every turn and me refusing to budge. By the end of it, I was shaking with frustration, and my mom stormed off, muttering about how family is supposed to help each other. That night, I locked the car keys in my room, half expecting Emma to try and take the car without my permission again. The thought of her reckless behavior repeating itself filled me with a mix of anger and anxiety. As I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, I realized that this wasn't just about the car anymore. It was about a deeper issue, a pattern of favoritism and enabling that had been playing out my entire life. Emma always got what she wanted, no matter the cost, and I was always expected to pick up the pieces. This time, I decided things were going to be different. I wasn't going to let her walk all over me anymore. The breaking point had come, and I was ready to stand my ground, even if it meant facing my family's wrath. The storm was far from over, but for the first time, I felt a spark of determination. This time, I was fighting back. That conversation with Emma about borrowing my new car was the final straw. I couldn't keep letting her walk all over me, and I couldn't keep letting my parents enable her behavior. For years, I'd been the responsible one, the one who made sacrifices and played by the rules, while Emma coasted through life without ever facing the consequences of her actions. After spending a sleepless night stewing over the situation, I came to a decision. It was time to set boundaries, once and for all. The next morning, I sat my parents and Emma down in the living room, determined to make myself clear. "I've thought a lot about this," I began, my voice steady but firm, "and I need to set some boundaries. From now on, I'm not lending Emma anything. No car, no money, nothing. This has gone on long enough." Predictably, my declaration didn't go over well. My mom's face immediately darkened, and she crossed her arms over her chest. "You're being selfish," she said, her tone sharp. "Family is supposed to help each other. Funny how that only applies when it benefits her." I shot back. Where was the help when I lost my car? Where was the support when I had to cover the bills and deal with the insurance mess? "It's always about Emma, and I'm done playing along." "That's not fair," my dad said, frowning. "Emma's been going through a lot lately. She needs our support. not your criticism. Support? I said, incredulous. How is letting her off the hook for everything support? All you're doing is teaching her that she can do whatever she wants without facing any consequences. Emma, who had been sitting silently up to this point, finally spoke up. You're acting like I'm some kind of villain, she said, her voice defensive. I didn't mean to crash your car. It was an accident. Why can't you just let it go? I turned to her, my frustration boiling over. Let it go? Emma, I'm still dealing with the fallout from that accident. I had to scrape together thousands of dollars to buy a new car. And you haven't even apologized, let alone offered to help. And now you want me to just trust you again? Not happening. I can't believe how petty you're being, Emma said, rolling her eyes. It's just a car. Get over it. Her dismissive attitude only fueled my determination. This isn't just about the car, I said. It's about respect. You took something that wasn't yours, wrecked it, and now you're acting like it's no big deal. That's not how this works. My mom cut in then, her voice sharp. Enough. You're being too harsh on her. She's your sister, and you're supposed to look out for each other. I've been looking out for her, I snapped. My whole life, I've been cleaning up her messes and taking responsibility for things that aren't my fault. Well, I'm done. From now on, she's on her own. The room fell silent, the tension thick enough to cut with a knife. I could see the anger simmering in my parents' eyes, but I refused to back down. Fine, my mom said finally, her tone icy. If that's how you feel, then don't come crying to us when you need help someday. That's the difference between me and Emma, I said, standing up. I don't expect anyone else to clean up my messes. I take responsibility for my actions, and it's about time she did too. With that, I walked out of the room, my heart pounding. I knew I just crossed a line I couldn't uncross, but I also felt a sense of relief. For the first time, I was standing up for myself, refusing to be the scapegoat for Emma's irresponsibility. In the days that followed, the atmosphere at home was tense. My parents barely spoke to me, and when they did, it was with thinly veiled disapproval. Emma, predictably, played the victim, sulking around the house and complaining about how unfairly I was treating her. But I didn't care. For the first time, I felt like I was reclaiming some control over my life. I stopped letting their opinions dictate my decisions and started focusing on my own needs. Of course, cutting ties wasn't easy. There were moments when I questioned whether I'd made the right choice, moments when the guilt crept in and made me second-guess myself. But every time I thought about the sacrifices I'd made for Emma and the complete lack of gratitude I'd received in return, I knew I'd done the right thing. This wasn't just about setting boundaries, it was about reclaiming my self-respect. And no matter how much backlash I faced, I wasn't going to back down. Little did I know, the drama was far from over. The fallout from my decision was only just beginning, and it would push me to my limits in ways I never could have imagined. Years passed, and while my relationship with Emma and my parents remained strained, I did my best to move on. I focused on my career, built a life for myself, and put as much distance as I could between me and the drama. But some wounds don't heal easily, and every now and then, the memories of those fights would bubble to the surface, reminding me of the deep divide in my family. When my parents passed away within a year of each other, I felt an unexpected mix of emotions. Grief, of course, for the loss of two people who had been such an integral part of my life, despite our differences. But there was also a sense of dread, knowing that Emma and I would have to face each other again, this time to settle the issue of their estate. I knew from the start that things wouldn't be simple. My parents' will was straightforward, dividing everything equally between Emma and me. But after everything she'd put me through, the car, the countless arguments, the years of favoritism, I couldn't stomach the thought of her walking away with half. The issue came to a head during the reading of the will. The lawyer, a composed woman in her 50s, outlined the terms with professional precision. The house, the savings, and other assets were to be split equally between the two of us. Emma sat across from me, a smug expression on her face, as if she'd just won the lottery. As soon as the lawyer finished, Emma leaned back in her chair and crossed her arms, a satisfied smirk spreading across her face. Well, I guess that settles it, she said. 50-50. Sounds fair to me. I couldn't hold back any longer. You can't seriously think you're entitled to half, I said, staring at her in disbelief. Why not? She replied, her tone dripping with false innocence. I'm their daughter too. I deserve my share. Your share? I said, my voice rising. What exactly have you done to deserve anything? I was the one who took care of them when they needed help. I was the one who handled their bills, their appointments, everything. You barely lifted a finger. Emma rolled her eyes, her smugness unwavering. "Oh, here we go," she said. "The martyr routine. You always act like you're so much better than me just because you have a stick up your ass about responsibility. Newsflash. They love me just as much as they loved you." "This isn't about love," I shot back. "This is about fairness. And after everything you've done, after everything you've taken from me, you don't get to sit here and act like you're entitled to half of their estate." The lawyer shifted uncomfortably in her seat, clearly wishing she were anywhere else. But I didn't care. I wasn't about to let Emma walk away with what she didn't deserve. "You're unbelievable," Emma said, shaking her head. "Do you even hear yourself? This is what you've always done, made everything about you. Just because you were their little accountant doesn't mean you're better than me." I clenched my fists under the table, struggling to keep my composure. "You're not getting half," I said firmly. "Not after the car, not after the years of you taking advantage of me and them. If you want your share, you'll have to fight me for it." "Oh, don't worry," she said, her voice cold. "I will." And so began a bitter legal battle that dragged on for months. Emma, true to form, played the victim, insisting that I was trying to rob her of her rightful inheritance. She painted me as greedy and heartless, conveniently leaving out all the times she'd taken advantage of me and my parents. On the other hand, came prepared. I brought up the car she'd totaled without permission, the money she'd borrowed and never repaid, and her complete lack of involvement in our parents' care. I presented evidence of the financial burdens I'd shouldered over the years, burdens she'd contributed nothing to. The courtroom was a tense battleground, with Emma's smugness giving way to visible frustration as the case dragged on. She hated being called out, especially in front of an audience, and it became clear that she wasn't used to being held accountable. In the end, the judge ruled in my favor. While the will stipulated an equal split, the evidence I presented made it clear that Emma had been negligent and had already benefited disproportionately from our family's resources. Her share was significantly reduced, and I was awarded the majority of the estate. Emma stormed out of the courtroom without a word, her face flushed with anger. I didn't follow her. There was nothing left to say. Winning the case was a bittersweet victory. It wasn't about the money. I would have gladly given up the inheritance if it meant having a family that treated me with fairness and respect. But this fight had been about principle, about standing up for myself after years of being taken for granted. As I walked out of the courthouse that day, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. For the first time, I was free from the drama, the favoritism, and the constant battle for validation. Emma and I haven't spoken since, and while part of me mourns the loss of our relationship, another part knows it's for the best. Some ties aren't worth holding on to, especially when they're only dragging you down. My parents' passing marked the end of one chapter, but for me, it was also the beginning of a new one where I could finally prioritize my own happiness and peace of mind. The day the judge ruled in my favor was one of the most surreal moments of my life. I sat there in the courtroom, listening as the decision was read aloud, feeling a strange mix of relief and exhaustion. The judge's reasoning was clear. Emma's history of irresponsibility, financial recklessness, and lack of involvement in our parents' care spoke volumes. It wasn't just about the inheritance. It was about fairness, accountability, and the truth finally coming to light. Emma, predictably, was furious. She shot me a glare that could have burned a hole through concrete, but I didn't flinch. I had spent years being on the receiving end of her entitlement and my parents' favoritism, and for once, I felt vindicated. As we left the courthouse, she didn't say a word to me. I didn't expect her to. She had always been good at playing the victim, and I knew she'd find a way to twist this outcome to suit her narrative. But that didn't matter anymore. I had fought for what was right, and I had won. In the weeks that followed, I began the slow process of rebuilding my life without the weight of family drama hanging over me. The inheritance wasn't just a financial relief. It was a chance to finally take control of my future. I used part of it to pay off lingering debts from the car fiasco and set the rest aside to invest in things that mattered to me. For the first time in years, I felt like I could breathe. There were no late-night phone calls from Emma asking for favors. No tense conversations with my parents about how I needed to cut her some slack. My life was my own again, and the peace that came with that was priceless. Of course, there were moments of sadness too. Losing my parents, even with all the complications in our relationship, was still a heavy blow. And the fallout with Emma was a reminder that family bonds aren't always as unbreakable as we'd like to believe. But in those quiet moments of reflection, I realized something important. I wasn't responsible for fixing what had been broken. I started focusing on the things that brought me joy, things I had put on hold for far too long while dealing with family drama. I reconnected with old friends, threw myself into hobbies I'd neglected, and even took a trip I'd been dreaming about for years. Every step forward felt like reclaiming a piece of myself that had been lost in the chaos. Sometimes, though, memories of the past would creep in, uninvited. I'd think about the nights I'd spent arguing with my parents, trying to make them see how unfairly they were treating me. I'd think about the countless times I had picked up the pieces after Emma's mistakes, hoping she'd finally learn to take responsibility. And I'd think about all the moments I'd wished for a family dynamic that didn't leave me feeling like an outsider in my own home. But instead of letting those memories weigh me down, I used them as a reminder of how far I'd come. I had chosen to stand up for myself, even when it felt like the odds were stacked against me. And that choice had given me the freedom to move forward without regret. Emma, as far as I know, is still living her life the same way she always has, blaming others for her problems and refusing to take accountability. We haven't spoken since the court case, and while part of me wishes things could have turned out differently, I've accepted that not every relationship is meant to be saved. Family can betray you in ways you never expect, and that betrayal cuts deeper than almost anything else. But it can also teach you valuable lessons about resilience, self-worth, and the importance of setting boundaries. As I sit here today, reflecting on everything that's happened, I don't feel anger or bitterness. I feel peace. I fought for what was right, and I came out stronger on the other side. And if there's one thing I've learned from all of this, it's that standing up for yourself is always worth it, even when it means walking away from the people who should have stood by you. Life isn't perfect, and neither are families. But sometimes, moving on means creating your own peace, your own happiness, and your own sense of justice. And for that, I'll always be grateful.